Okay, today we're going to dive into a case that, well, it really forces us to face one of the toughest questions in our justice system. It's a story that starts with a truly horrific crime, but it ends with this huge, profound ethical dilemma.
So, the facts of the case? They're pretty stark. Chilling, actually. Look, this wasn't some crime of passion, not a spur-of-the-moment mistake. No, this was planned out, meticulously. And that's what makes this next part so incredibly complicated.
And here it is. This is the fact that just changes everything. The killers were teenagers. I mean, legally, they were still children. Their minds, their moral compasses, they were all still very much a work in progress. So this all sets up the huge question we're going to be digging into, right? When the crime itself is, well, monstrous, but the people who did it are still children, how does a society even begin to figure out what true justice looks like? All right, let's really get into this core conflict, because on one hand, you've got this calculated, just awful act. But on the other hand, you have the age, the fact that these are kids we're talking about. And right away, society is just split right down the middle on how to even think about them. And this really gets to the heart of the two big arguments. See, on one side, you have the argument for punishment. It's all about intent, right? The idea that they were conscious, they knew exactly what they were doing. But then, the argument for rehabilitation, it points to something totally different. The science of the teenage brain and this incredible proven capacity for change. And look, this isn't just some opinion. It's backed up by science. Psychology tells us pretty clearly that a teenager's brain isn't just a smaller version of an adult's brain. Not at all. It's wired completely differently, especially in the parts that handle things like impulse control, long-term thinking, and really understanding consequences. And that massive potential for change becomes a huge factor in this whole debate. So with all that, how does a society even begin to untangle a problem like this? Well, one way is to use these established ethical frameworks, almost like different lenses to look at the situation. So let's walk through 4 of the big ones. Okay, first up, we have something called utilitarianism. Now, this one isn't about, hard and fast rules. It's more like moral math. You basically weigh the outcomes and pick the choice that's going to bring the most happiness or the least harm to the most people. But here's where it gets really interesting with utilitarianism. The same exact principle can lead you to 2 completely different conclusions. I mean, one argument says the greatest good for society is locking them up for life, right? Keeps everyone safe. But you can make an equally strong utilitarian case that the greater good comes from rehabilitation, from the hope and the benefit to society of showing that people can change. All right, let's switch gears to our next lens. Deontology. And this is kind of the polar opposite of utilitarianism. It's not about the results or the consequences. Nope, it's all about the action itself. Some things are just right, and some things are just wrong. Period. So from this point of view, it's pretty straightforward. A fundamental moral rule, do not kill, was broken. End of story. For a deontologist, things like the consequences or the age of the killers or their potential to change, all of that is secondary. The number one duty is to uphold that moral law and deliver a fair punishment because the rule was broken. Okay, that brings us to our third lens, virtue ethics. And this one shifts the focus completely. It's not so much about the action or even the consequences. It's all about the character of the person. So the big question isn't what's the right thing to do. It's more like, what can we do to help this person become a good person? So if you're looking at it through this lens, a life sentence might actually be seen as a failure. The whole point of the justice system wouldn't just be punishment. It would be to actually develop virtues, to guide these kids, with the hope that they could one day become moral, contributing adults. And that brings us to our final framework, restorative justice. Now, this is a really different way of thinking. It sees crime not just as breaking a law, but as causing real harm to people, to families, to a community. So its main goal isn't punishment, it's healing. So what does that look like in practice? Well, this approach is all about dialogue and accountability. The idea is to bring everyone together, victims, offenders, the community, to talk about the harm that was caused and figure out how it can be repaired. It's built on this core belief that offenders can and absolutely should take responsibility and try to make things right.
So, after looking at this problem through all these different lenses, you know where we end up? Right back at this timeless, fundamental conflict that's at the very heart of our legal system, the constant pull between justice and mercy.
Yeah, on one side you have justice. It demands fairness, consequences. It says a life was taken, and there must be a severe punishment. It's all about upholding the law. But then you have mercy, and that's about compassion, forgiveness. It's what offers the hope of a second chance, especially when you see real remorse and that potential for someone to be better.
So, if we kind of map this all out, it's pretty clear there's no single easy answer here, right? Deontology, with its focus on hard rules, that points straight towards justice. But then you've got virtue ethics and restorative justice. They're focused on the person and on healing, and they lean heavily toward mercy. And poor old utilitarianism is stuck right in the middle, with good arguments for both sides.
And that, right there, is the very definition of a true moral dilemma. This isn't about choosing between a right answer and a wrong one. It's about being forced to choose between two competing ideas of right, where both sides have a totally legitimate, really compelling argument.
And so that leaves us with this one final, really powerful question. It forces us all to decide what we truly prioritize. When a child commits an adult crime, should society focus on the life that was taken or on the life that remains? There really is no easy answer.